Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now today is time for me to be a bit of a fanboy, because if I go back in time, before I was writing and talking about tech, I began life in IT support. And if you were to ask me, Neil, what was one piece of software that improved your fix rate as an IT support analyst, I would have to say Malwarebytes. And I'm sure anybody that's worked in IT will know all about Malwarebytes, and people that are confident looking after their home PCs over the years, I'm sure Malwarebytes has helped them get out of a few scrapes too. So today I have Marcin Kleczynski, the CEO and co-founder of Malwarebytes, joining me on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to talking to him and thanking him directly for creating Malwarebytes. And I also want to learn more about his story and how, after working as a computer repairer and being involved in forums in the mid-2000s, he co-founded Malwarebytes with Bruce Harrison. I think it was back in January 2008. So I want to learn more about the origins of the company, his origin story, and also talk about the importance of managed service providers for more small to medium-sized businesses, and more widely, the growth potential of the cybersecurity industry, as well as bring more people into the industry. But enough spoilers from me. Buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the US, where Marcin is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Neil, for having me. My name is Marcin Kleczynski. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Malwarebytes. Malwarebytes is a cybersecurity provider. So we pretty much took antivirus and threw it upside down on its head. I started the company back while I was a teenager, and throughout my university career, pretty much brought it to life.
Wow. And before we begin our conversation, there's so much I want to talk about with you today. But first of all, I've got to give you a big thank you. The amount of times that Malwarebytes got me out of a few scrapes in my IT support days is the difference that you guys make all the way over there to me just doing a support role in IT over here. It's a big difference you make. You must get to hear loads of stories like that, right?
You know, I do. A lot of people have told me that work at Malwarebytes, while they wear a t-shirt that says Malwarebytes, they get hugs at the airport and a big thanks for, saving my PC. I don't know if I'm just not approachable, but I don't get that kind of attention as I go, in public places, but have heard definitely from, a lot of folks that we've saved their bacon once or twice.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd love to find out more about your backstory, though. So can you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from? How those worlds of technology and security and malware, etc., would essentially put you on this path that you're on today?
Yeah, as they say, it's a bit of an accident. So Let's go back to my days as a teenager. I was, we had one of those white Dell computers on the desktop, 56K modem, and got pretty interested in it, just, video gaming and so on. And so I downloaded a pirated video game. We were a relatively poor family. Parents couldn't really afford much. So I went to, LimeWire or whatever it was at the time and downloaded something. And all of a sudden, trying to install this pirated video game, things are, stuff is just coming up on the computer. And I swear my first actual, I wouldn't even call it a virus as much of a nuisance, was a purple gorilla jumping around my screen trying to sell advertising. And, I was lost. Like, we couldn't take this to a tech repair shop down the street. Again, we just didn't have the money. So, and my parents were, not too happy that I had screwed up the only, the most expensive thing probably in the house at the time. So I went online and I searched for, my symptoms. I'm pretty sure I typed something like purple gorilla jumping around the screen, and I found, a message board, a forum that was helping people like me. And so I posted my question. A woman named Mika from Belgium came to my rescue. She said, "Here's what you got to go do." And I quickly realized that a lot of the stuff that I had to run and do was non-commercial. It wasn't from companies making money. It was from these volunteers on this message board. Long story short, I stuck around. I decided to try to help, automate some of this remediation, this threat remediation, and realized quickly that these real products out there that were making billions of dollars were just not cutting it. And so decided to stick around and, help where I could. And the company just kind of took off from there.
Well, I'm getting so many flashbacks listening to you there. I too was a LimeWire guy, getting myself into all kinds of scrapes, and the sweet sound of a 56K modem connecting, that couldn't be beaten back in the day, could it?
I missed that.
It's almost like you knew from the sound if it was going to be a smooth connection or not. I imagine that.
I love this. I love the speeds. I love the speeds we have now. But if it could just make a little noise as it goes online, right?
Yeah, 100%. And of course, that path would lead you to Malwarebytes, which I'm sure most people listening would have used at some point in their lives. But with the cybersecurity workforce gap widening in the industry, with I've read on 0% unemployment, but I've also recently read that it's negative now because it's almost impossible to be unemployed in that industry. So I'm curious, what implications is this having on cyber attacks this year that you're noticing already?
Yeah, every year is a new adventure, I suppose, in cybersecurity. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of vacancies in the cybersecurity industry. And, you see it in the news every single day. There's some attack, whether it's on critical nation state infrastructure or on some software company. We need more hands on deck, as they say. This is a real problem. It's a growing problem as everything becomes digital, as even refrigerators come online. The gap is widening, and there's just not, even when I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana for a computer science degree 10 years ago, actually more like 12 years ago now, the cybersecurity program was almost non-existent. So this is, we're catching up pretty rapidly, needing to catch up to fill that gap. So it's down to the universities. It's the self-study. I'm a kind of self-made in terms of cybersecurity. I didn't actually go through a program or anything like that, but we need more people in this industry, period.
Yeah, man. And when you look at the news there, on one side, you've got zero unemployment rate in cybersecurity. And on the other side, you've got traditional job roles are disappearing due to automation, etc. So, really, it's got to be a great time for people from any background to obtain a certification and pursue a career change, right?
Yeah, Neil, even the certification part, while interesting and, possibly necessary for some roles, there are many roles in the cybersecurity industry that don't need that. There's entry-level roles, there's, and on top of that, there's just so many curriculums online that you can, self-learn a lot of the basics and even more. And I think we're looking for all kinds of, people from all kinds of backgrounds. So I wouldn't dissuade anybody from cybersecurity because they don't have a certification or haven't gone through the right classes. There's just so much opportunity here. It really is.
So I'm curious, how do you think the cybersecurity industry will weather this current economic climate? Because essentially cyber attacks continue to increase, so will the need for better defenses.
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure cyber will be as affected as, maybe other industries through economic, challenges. I do feel during a great economic time, many companies invest a lot into cybersecurity and maybe even a lot of shelfware. So they buy products and never implement them, never deploy them. I do think those products, through a downturn, maybe get discontinued. And so security teams probably get a little wiser during not so great times because they have to make the dollars go a little further. That doesn't mean that they won't invest in the talent they need or the technology that they need. It just means the stuff that maybe they bought from pure excitement or marketing that isn't really adding value will maybe get exited. But I do think investment in cybersecurity, for obvious reasons, with what's happening and you see, every single day, will continue, especially into talent, into automation, into real defenses and services. A lot of reliance on companies that provide services in terms of cybersecurity because of the talent gap that we have.
And it almost feels that we can't have any tech conversation without mentioning ChatGPT at the moment. There's a lot of people concerned that it could lower the entry level into creating cyber attacks. And there are a lot of filters on ChatGPT to stop that. But equally, you and I know there's going to be ways around those filters. I'm just curious what you think of all the madness that's happening and the hype around it at the moment.
Well, it's just very interesting. And I'm sure you've played with it and, asked it some questions. I asked it to write a resume for me just to see what it would do. I've asked it what it thinks about Malwarebytes. What does it like? What doesn't it like? I asked it to predict some stocks for me, and that it could not do. Look, I think it's a very fascinating technology. We all know how wrong it can be. We've all asked it a question that it was just absurdly yet confidently wrong about. I do think there's, tremendous applications with technology like that in cybersecurity, many that we haven't even thought of. But at the same time, it is hype, right? Yeah. And this is like, Tesla's self-driving. Yeah, it's got some applications, but to this day, 10 years later, the cars are not really driving themselves. And you've seen YouTube videos of it, of them crashing into curbs and stuff. And then, you look at many of our competitors over the years have really adapted or adopted this kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning. And of course, there are applications. My company, Malwarebytes, we of course use artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it's not the silver bullet. There needs to be human guidance. There needs to be other mechanisms of detection, and so I do believe that there are applications of Chat GPT for cybersecurity, but we need to be very careful with deploying this technology. And the worst thing you can do in cybersecurity is not detect a threat. The second worst thing you could do in cybersecurity is detect something legitimate as a threat. Ask me how I know that. And this application of artificial intelligence, if it leads to a tremendous amount of false positives, you're actually now chasing ghosts more than you are threats. Yeah. And so that balance is really important. And I think I'm excited about the future and its application, but I do think we need to be cautious.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head a few moments ago where you said it's got this uncanny ability to say things that are say things confidently that are completely wrong. I told it to create a bio for me, and some of it was right, and it sounded amazing and very confident, and most of it was completely untrue. So you do have to be careful. But sorry to go off at a tangent there, but just bringing us back into our conversation today. Can you expand on the importance of managed service providers for small to medium-sized businesses, especially with the cyber security threats on the increase?
Yeah, managed service providers, we call them MSPs, are just super critical in for the future. It's actually one of the biggest strategic bets my company is making because we believe, again, they are the future. So, consider you start a new business today and you grow to 25, 50 people worldwide. There's just no way that at that scale you can afford somebody in the security, profession. You can't even really afford an IT professional. I mean, it's just not a full-time job, depending on what you do, of course. But so who do you call, right? You need provisioning of desktops, laptops, you need email, you need protection, you need a website. You call a managed service provider, an MSP. Why? Because that's their specialty. You'll pay less, for them than you would an actual full-time professional inside the business. Now, when you get to a scale of 100, 200, 500 people, millions of revenue, whatever, you may bring that role in-house. But, as you're growing, you want to outsource some of this IT. And so as security gets more serious, and a lot of these small businesses, which in the past did not really have, IT or security professionals inside the business, are now leaning towards managed service providers or managed security service providers, MSSPs. And so, you basically pick up the phone, you call one of these managed service providers, and for a few dollars per user per month, more than that probably, but you get the whole security stack, the whole IT stack that you need, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's great, right? But the problem is when they can't acquire the talent either because there's such a shortage. So, giving them the automation, the tools that they need, it's a big bet for us. I'm pretty bullish on their future because in 10 years, even if you're 100 people, the last thing you're going to do is try to, find talent internally. You're going to just outsource it to somebody that's a specialist. Yeah. And so that's why we're investing so heavily there, because I do think that's really the future of IT and security is managed service providers.
And if we were to zoom out just for a moment, how do you see the growth potential of the cybersecurity industry? Because it does seem to be growing at an incredible rate.
The attacks are not stopping.
Yeah.
And I still think many companies and individuals in the world are dramatically behind, on their security posture. So much of the growth you're seeing is still 5 years in arrears, right? These are companies that, look, there are still many ATMs, cash machines in the world that run on Windows XP.
Yeah.
That is just baffling. There are manufacturing plants in the world that are running purely on Windows XP, maybe even earlier versions. So, Microsoft stopped providing updates to those kinds of operating systems many, many years ago. And yet these are critical, plants and cash machines and so on all over the world, energy grids that are running on ancient operating systems that are vulnerable. I would categorize that as a security problem, right? A cybersecurity problem. And so even things like patching and vulnerability management, critical operating system updates, security fixes, I would categorize that as a security problem. And so the growth, I don't think will stop, because think of what we're using today. What are the vulnerabilities that will be found? And 5 years from now, what are we actually fixing from today's problems, right? So I don't know. I'm incredibly bullish on this space for obvious reasons, and everything you see in the news is not giving me any pause. We track these cyber attackers through our intel team, and they have no appetite to stop. They want to keep going, and so it's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, the place that I always get nervous is airports. Not just the places where you check in the new shiny kiosks there, but if you actually go to speak with someone and they have to look something up on the computer, the technology that's being used in airlines all around the world is based on from technology in the 60s, and they just keep building stuff on top. But the interfaces are like from a completely different age. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, well, you look at the Southwest Airlines meltdown over the holidays. I mean, it is what it is, right? They did as best they could on trying to fix that, but it's a big technology problem for them. I mean, as of 10 years ago, Southwest could not actually book a red-eye flight because they could not depart on a day and arrive on a different day. So, we deal with technology every day in our lives, and that's a big security challenge for sure.
And on this Daily Tech podcast, I love getting people thinking differently about well-known brands. And most people listening to our conversation today will have a perception of what Malwarebytes represents, the kind of problems that you solve, etc. But I'd love to try and get a different perspective from you today. So can you tell me more about the background on the creation and ascension of Malwarebytes, and also the importance of things like positive leadership in business and creating a good culture, investing in your people? Because yes, you're a tech company, but it's all that people stuff. That's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah, so let's start with the first question there. I think the perception Malwarebytes has had over the years is changed and is changing. So when we started the company back in 2008, traditional antivirus, so think the Norton, the Avast, the McAfee's of the world, brands that everybody knew because they used them at home, well, they were failing. And so what we did was to say, listen, you can still use those products. We will work right alongside them to make them better. And then we quickly realized that we actually were far better than them, and told our users, our customers, it's okay. You don't need to use them any longer. You could just use Malwarebytes. So the first kind of transformation we went through is, hey, we're no longer this wingman or secondary complementary product. We are the thing. You should use us. The second transformation we went through was really along the lines of the conversation we just had, which is security is getting much more complicated, and to do just one thing for a customer is not enough. And so what we call endpoint protection, or next gen antivirus for our small and medium businesses that we protect, just isn't enough. And introducing vulnerability and patch management, introducing DNS filtering or URL filtering, network protection, and introducing managed services where literally somebody can pick up the phone and call us and say, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't want to manage your product. Can you do it for us? We'll happily do that. So like that transformation has been pretty exciting. On the people side, I mean, look, we're only as good as our people. And to build, a soulless, heartless company, that's what you're going to see in the reflection of the product, and that's not what we're about. If you go back to 2008 when we first started the company, I was this geek on a message board, and the first 20, 30 people we hired, we were just all geeks on a message board. There was no job interview, there was no careers page, there was no everybody works 9 to 5 all day, every day and takes the weekends off. We were just super passionate about what we do, and to this day, that's holding true. So I do think really having a mission, a purpose, and it's really easy when it comes to fighting cyber criminals, right? We're not making some, I don't know, some furniture or something, which might be hard to really get people passionate about. I mean, some people, I'm sure, but like, we're fighting the bad people out there that are hurting real users. That's a pretty cool mission to get behind, and I think it makes things a little easier.
It is incredibly cool. And we have talked about a lot of the negative sides of cyber attacks, etc. And we all see enough of that when we're doom scrolling away down our news feeds. But what makes you hopeful about the future of cybersecurity, and also the role that Malwarebytes will play in that future too?
Well, the growth potential for sure. I mean, we see what's happening. I'm excited that the conversations have become much more, broad. There were companies that thought cybersecurity was an afterthought. Now it's a board level topic for many companies because, I mean, the last thing you want is to be on the Wall Street Journal front page saying, you've leaked millions of customer data or operations have shut down, and and it's a real risk. I mean, even for companies like us who literally what we do every day is cybersecurity. Well, we have a lot of people in the company that aren't cybersecurity professionals, and so even when we send out a demo phishing email that says like, why don't you type in your password and your email and password here because we'll get you some cool gift cards. People fall for that, and that's unfortunate, but understandable. It's a human factor. It's a human element. So I am excited, about the future. I think I find it quite thrilling. I understand that people's lives are affected, of course, but it's quite thrilling to be on the hunt for these cyber criminals. And some of the techniques that they use, I mean, are quite innovative. They are not stupid people, that's for sure. And that gives me pause about the future, right? Because we are moving into territory where real lives are affected. Hospital ransomware attacks are not a joke. They're not just something that ends up in the news. These are patients that are affected, records that are locked, people who need antibiotics or allergic to antibiotics, whatever, right? We're actually dealing with people's lives as it pertains to cybersecurity. You talked about the airport. I mean, is there a future where an airliner gets downed by, a cybersecurity attack? Now we're getting into some sci-fi and, there's obviously systems and such in place, but that problem set, I know, does not bode well for the world, but gets me excited and up every morning on how do we combat that? How do we fix that? So,
well, I love chatting with you today. We did begin the podcast talking about your origin story. So as we come full circle, I want to ask you to look back and reflect on your career. And I'm sure you've had more than a few war stories under your belt in that time. So can you share the funniest or most interesting story that has happened in your career?
Oh, that's easy. So about 3-4 years after starting the company, I'm at the University of Illinois, getting a computer science degree, and I'm in a dormitory with a roommate. We were really slumming it. One fan to blow the air in, one fan to blow the air out, and no air conditioning. And I've got my desktop there. This is where I'm developing Malwarebytes. And I'm disassembling a piece of malware. All of a sudden, the screen goes white. My browser goes white and says, "You've been banned from the university network because we suspect a threat infection or something like that. You can download McAfee, Trend Micro, or Symantec, or you can give us a call." I said, okay, I'm not going to download any of those products. I'm going to give this a call. A kid, I don't know, no older than I, shows up at my door, proceeds to sit down in front of my desktop, says, "Oh, boy, I've really screwed this up, like giving me a hard time," and downloads Malwarebytes off of the web right onto the desktop. And I didn't say a word. He's like, "This will fix it. Don't worry." So, I mean, that was awesome to see, just to have somebody literally using my product right in front of me. To this day, I don't think he knows that, that's what happened. So I'd say that was a great moment in life.
Wow, what an amazing story. And just saying that, that's a conversation I've heard in IT here in the UK so many times. And it's just amazing what you've accomplished here. And for anybody listening wanting to find out more information about Malwarebytes, the work you're doing, maybe you've got a blog and things, can you just remind everyone of the best place to start? Because there are so many different domains and URLs now.
Yeah, for sure, Neil. So malwarebytes.com, you could download, you could Google Malwarebytes, you'll get there quite easily. We've got a big free download button on the website. Product is completely free to scan your device and check for threats and remove them, even just as easily. For me personally, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and happy to connect.
Awesome. So much I loved about our conversation today. From the cybersecurity industry will weather the current economic climate. Cyber attacks are continuing to increase. So will the need for better defences. The importance of managed service providers for small to medium-sized businesses. And also your inspiring origin story there. And that story that you just shared will stay with me a long time after this podcast recording. But just a big thank you for sharing your story today.
Thanks, Neil, for having me. Really appreciate it.
As I said at the very beginning, a big episode for me. I'm a bit of a fanboy of Marcin and everything he's created with Malwarebytes. And again, a big thank you to him for getting me out of a few scrapes in the corporate world there with those machines riddled with malware and spyware back in the day. But I'd love to hear your story. I'd also love to hear any experiences you've had with Malwarebytes over the years and problems that it helped solve for you, because I'm sure there are so many different stories like we've shared today. So I'd love to hear about those. And you can share those with me directly by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @NeilC.Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going. I want to hear more stories like this. And if you'd like to come on here, we can do that too. So keep those messages coming in. I'm going to be back tomorrow with another guest talking about a different industry and a different story. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today. And until next time, don't be a stranger.